Charity from Texas asked this question. Since my child was small, he seemed to have an ability to see people. One example, we were at the mall and he saw a man walking and he tugged my hand and said, "Mommy, that's a bad man, Mommy." And when I looked up, the man was staring at us and I felt the same thing in the spirit. How do you cultivate that gift in your children? That's a great question, because one of the things that we really need to focus on and make a priority is helping our children to grow in the spirit. Not just grow intellectually and emotionally and socially, but really to grow in the things of the Spirit, not just in spiritual information such as Bible memorization, though that is a great way to grow in the Spirit. So let's start with, what is this that we're talking about? And this is what we would call in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the gift of the distinguishing of spirits. Being able to recognize the spirit that's in someone, whether or not it's good, it's bad, is the source from the Lord, is the source from a demonic spirit, or is that or is it the human spirit that's operating? But also being able to recognize the thoughts and the intents in a person. So recognizing, well, that person is a bad person. There's bad things that are coming from them. And so that's what that is. So how do you develop that in children? So how you develop it in the first place is you start to practice that gift. So let's talk about children. How do you help them to practice? Well, one of the things is when they make comments like that, whether you recognize, agree, or don't agree, engage that in conversation. Talk to them. Don't make it weird. Don't make it like, "Oh, you're so gifted. Like, let's do that again. Look at this person." Because you can end up causing them to go in two different directions. If you give too much attention, if you make them think like, "This is weird, this makes you better than everybody else," they will begin to pull back out of fear because they don't understand it and they don't want to be weird, they don't want to stick out, or they will begin to make it up to try to get more attention. So it's just something that happens, and whatever level of spirituality. So children that see heaven, that have gone up and visited with the Lord, that are able to recognize angels, or that have prophetic dreams, or know things before they happen, whatever spiritual gifting it is, help them to realize that it is normal, because it actually is. The idea that we wouldn't recognize things in the spirit is abnormal. Now, our educational system has taught us something very different, but our role as parents and as leaders that are helping people to press into the things of the Spirit is to help them to understand how things really are and to get a biblical worldview. And in the biblical worldview, that's pretty normal. If you have a relationship with God, and God's going to speak to you. If you have a relationship with Holy Spirit is going to be speaking to you. And the gifts and the callings of God don't always happen after we have a relationship with God. Often God will give us something even at birth. So don't make too much out of it, because it can cause them to pull back or begin to make up. But here's the next piece. Begin to help them to talk it through. So what was it that you felt when you looked at that person? "Oh, I just felt anger," or "I felt scared," or whatever language that they give to it. And okay, yeah, that makes sense. When I looked at that person, I felt like there was something wrong too. I'm really glad that you caught that. That's great. Let me know if you notice anything else like that. Make sure that you pay attention to that. Hey, whenever you feel something like that, make sure that you don't let that person get too close to you. So you're teaching them how to trust it, because if they trust it, then they're going to pay attention to it. And if they pay attention to it, they'll probably get more. Because the principle, I think it's Luke chapter 16, verse 19. It says that we're faithful in little, we will be faithful in much. But if we're not faithful in little, we will not be faithful in much. And so as you teach them how to be faithful with what they have, then God's going to keep on trusting them with more and more. And Hebrews 5:14 is another principle that plays into this. It says that those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern good from evil. So we can actually practice our spiritual senses, our spiritual muscles, if you will, and we can grow through use in our ability to recognize when it's God, when it's just us, and how to respond to those things. If we teach our children how to do that when they're young, then it will be easier for them when they're old. Because I teach all over the world. I teach people how to hear from God. And the reality is I'm more teaching people how to stop ignoring God than I am teaching them a new skill. They've learned how to ignore God, and they just need to unlearn things even more than they need to learn things. Because most often people have heard from God from a young age, but they were told to ignore it, to not pay attention to, oh, that's not real. Oh, that's not important. Oh, that's just weird. Oh, that's ESP. Oh, that's something else. That's a fifth sense or a sixth sense, I mean. So you get this unlearning process. If we train our kids when they're young, then they won't have as much to unlearn, and they'll be able to move forward a lot further than what we've been able to. So that is one process. Don't make too much of it. Ask them questions and make it normal and help them to recognize how it happened. But then the next piece is explain your experiences. When you sense something that you can share with them, say, hey, when I saw this is what I saw. Oh, God was telling me about this. If you make spiritual things normal, then they will be normal for them. So make sure that you share your own experiences and how you hear from the Spirit, and not just your victories, but also your failures. Because we can learn a lot more from other people's failures often than we do from their victories. And that's the same thing with kids. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, it makes it easier for them to make mistakes and keep on trying. And that's the kind of atmosphere that we want to develop, not just in our families. That's the type of atmosphere that we desperately need to develop in the church, because that's the type of atmosphere that will help prophetic people to mature and to grow. So hopefully that was helpful for you, Charity. Thanks for your question, and we'll see you guys again on another Fireside Chat.